year, everyone. Welcome to the first of 2023 Bunker Office Hours, a weekly live show brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, national network of veteran entrepreneurs and military spouses dedicated to helping our ecosystem start and grow their own businesses. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, coming to you live from Montego Bay, Jamaica today, joined by my co-host, Amy Morrison, and our special guest today, fellow Naval Academy graduate and entrepreneur, Mr. Matthew Brown. What's going on, y'all?
Howdy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How's everybody feeling getting back into it after the new year? People feeling energized and refreshed, or like, oh man, here we go again?
Yeah, oh man, here we go again.
No, I'm ready to go, man. 2023 is going to be the best year ever. No doubt
Good.
about it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So,
I'm here for it. Good morning, Elijah, to everybody tuning in. We love having y'all here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Amy to give us some updates for things taking place in the new year.
thanks, Mike. Okay, so I am running the back end and also having to talk to y'all. So if I'm not looking at you, that's why. Going on this year, first I wanted to thank everyone who donated to our end of year campaign. We didn't quite hit our goal, but we came really, really close. But all donations count. All donations are useful, and we'll go back to our programming. And I just wanted to say that to everybody. That said, two things. One, you can continue to donate anytime you want. You don't have to just do it at the end of the year. Feel free. So you can check that out on our website. And also the United Miles for a Mission campaign is still going on for another 54 days. So if you have miles with United, you can donate those to us, and that helps us send our ambassadors to their annual meetings and get-togethers, and where they can learn and grow and stuff like that. And I will put that in the chat once I am done talking. And then a couple other things going on. The Breaking Barriers in Entrepreneurship program is their January cohort starts on the 23rd, but apps are still open for that. So if you are looking to get involved in our Breaking Barriers, which is for early stage startups, generally with 4 cohorts: Latinx, Black entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, and Asian entrepreneurs specifically, you can still apply for that. And that cohort does start at the end of the month. And then finally, I don't know that there's a lot of events going on, because we did do our showcase at the end of the year last year in December. So we're probably a little quiet right now, but if you ever want to check out events near you, you can check out our community page, and that is at bunkerlabs.org/communities. And that's kind of it.
So appreciate it, Amy. Glad to see you
Yep.
back. We're real excited to create some amazing content this year. And our guest today, none other than Matthew Brown, reached out to me on LinkedIn. Excited to get him on the show. And Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Chimney Trail, a subscription family healthcare company designed to build grit in children through clinically vetted, nature-based cognitive behavioral therapies. I also want to give Matt a round of applause. He closed his pre-seed round. I know that was not a small feat. Congratulations. But talk to our listeners about what you've got going on with Chimney Trail and just your journey thus far.
You got it. Thanks, Mike. Hey, so Chimney Trail, there's a huge wave of interest in the mental health care and just like general wellness space. And Chimney Trail exists. Initially, we existed specifically to address the mental health care needs of children. And then we discovered along the way that, hey, what we're building is actually pretty transferable and can be used for folks of all ages. But what we've created is a subscription box that people can, you can jump on chimneytrail.com and buy a subscription to it. But it's a subscription box, and inside are nature-based activities that introduce concepts of something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And that sounds really fancy. And I'm not a doctor, I'm a naval officer by trade. But cognitive behavioral therapy is basically the very first thing that you get whenever you visit a professional in the mental health space, whether it's a psychologist or psychiatrist. And what we've done is we've just taken the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy and made them super accessible in these little nature-based activities. That's what we do for people of all ages.
What made you come up with this idea?
So the company was actually born of some pretty tragic circumstances. I was the captain of one of our Navy ships in San Diego a number of years ago. And after I left command, shortly after I left command, one of our very best officers took his own life. And I started looking into it, and I said, how is it, like, we would have never imagined that this person was suffering in this way. He's such a, a bright person, and, like, future, leader type person. And we obviously missed it. We missed some sign or whatever it happened to be. And I thought, well, hey, maybe it was me as the captain of the ship. Maybe I did something wrong, and I started owning it, maybe in a way that I shouldn't have. And then, we started looking, maybe it's a Navy thing. And the more that we dug into it, the more that we realized that this, like, the risk of suicide right now, it's, depending on the study that you look at, the second or third leading cause of death. That's a real issue. 1 in 10 kids born in the United States today are going to make an attempt on their life by the time that they graduate high school. So we learned really fast that this wasn't just a Navy thing or just my ship thing. This was like a all of us thing. And we need to figure out how to give people the tools to just not be susceptible to a pathological level of anxiety and depression. And we shouldn't have to go to a doctor to learn some of these basic skills. So maybe we can just make it easy with a subscription box, the same way that Stitch Fix did for clothes. And so here we have it.
So what's interesting to me about this is I think a lot of vets in our community come up with great ideas. Like, we identify this problem, and then we say, okay, we want to build a business around it. But if I'm not mistaken, you didn't have any formal business training, no business school or anything like that. So how did you, unless I'm wrong, but how were you able to say, like, okay, here's a problem. Now I actually think we can turn this into a business model, and also convince investors that, hey, I think it's a good business model for them to invest in?
Yeah, so I didn't have what you would consider, conventional business school training, but I did. The Naval Postgraduate School has a nice business school that sort of focuses on, the government, like federal acquisition regulation, all that sort of stuff. And I did go through that. I left early to go do a fellowship for the Chief of Naval Operations, and I sort of learned the ins and outs of, venture capital and private equity as I was doing that fellowship. So it was sort of an unconventional path to learn this stuff. And then I just used that experience to help launch Chimney Trail. So, and then the other piece is that learn about it all you want, but you really do need to get your million no's before you get to your first yes. And we went very much through that process. So, I've been working it full time for a year. We've been like truly a company for a year, but the 3 years prior to it, we were in prototyping phase, investor identification phase, all that sort of stuff, just like slogging it out until we got to something that looked like a real product.
How are you driving revenue initially? And then what are you thinking about driving revenue long term?
Yeah, we did everything wrong initially. We thought like that, hey, I'm going to jump on Facebook and Instagram and give it a bunch of money. And then people are going to give me money in return. And that's not how it works. So instead of just like, trying to just jump out into the market is almost like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, that's sort of the analogy that I use. And for us, it was like, okay, obviously we're not making a sound. We're just like firing off information into the ether, and it's not resonating. Also, like, our product, it wasn't as clearly defined when we started out. So we went down the social media marketing channel and all that. And eventually we realized, wait a minute, there's this thing called an adoption curve. And you have your, and I have to credit PenFed Credit Union has a great incubator that we went to, the Veteran Entrepreneur Investment Program. And they sort of make you anchor on, like, how is it that you're going to market? And then we said, okay, who are the people that are truly the innovators on this adoption curve? There's like innovator, early adopter, and then like late adopter and laggard. And so we really hadn't found our innovator. And then we realized, wait a minute, yes, we have found our innovator. It's the reason we started the company to begin with. It's the Department of Defense and their suicide prevention efforts and their effort to push back on pathological anxiety and depression. Let's go talk to decision makers in that space. So rather than just like then on direct to consumer and wasting a bunch of money, we sort of pulled back, reassessed the field, and said, let's go be the solution for this Department of Defense. And then out of that, maybe we can expand into a business to business construct with corporate wellness programs. And then maybe after that, D2C, sometime down the road.
All right. So I want to give our audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you've got some You want to poke some holes in Matt's business model? Got any questions? Go ahead and drop them in the chat. So going back to the initial story, you had an officer, sadly take his own life. But you start, if I'm not mistaken, Chimney Trails is more kids focused. It's youth focused. What made you go down that versus targeting, more, generals, sailors, and Marines, etc.?
Yeah. So the reason that we focused on kids is because they're the concrete's not yet. I mean, with a kid, you can sort of get in there as their decision-making processes and as their development of self sort of is being created. Whereas when you've got, adults that have been around a certain number of years and sort of like really alienated some thought patterns, it's a little bit to like break the patterns that they've created for themselves. But with kids, we said, hey, we can get in early and then prevent this problem from ever happening in the future. And sort of the strategic reason that we did that is because we knew that we wanted to solve this problem for the Department of Defense, the suicide prevention problem and we also know that there's a tremendous recruiting problem within the Department of Defense right now. We haven't hit our numbers, in a bad couple of years. And we said, how do we solve that? And we realized, okay, a couple of things are happening at the same time. 1% of the recruits that we get are what they call a legacy recruit, which means that they have somebody very close to them, whether it's a relative, first or second degree, that also served, that sort of introduced DoD lifestyle. And if any number of them are having a mental health challenge that is going to prevent them from serving, then we're never going to have the sort of force, the all-volunteer force that we want to sustain. And we need the all-volunteer force because the technology that we're using in the service is so advanced now that you can't keep people in to solve the problem. So we knew that we wanted to get it so that the soon-to-be military accessions were both physically and mentally capable of military service to begin with. So we just started, focusing on kids. The second reason was because the research that we did initially about resilience building was from the University of Stanford's Bing Nursery School, and also the University of South Dakota was doing some amazing work on breaking cycles of alcoholism on Native American reservations for youth populations. And we were using that research, and it was for ages 4 to 14. So we said, hey, let's focus on this age bracket. But then as we've gone, we've got, doctors from all over the place. We've got Dr. Bob Dudas from Johns Hopkins, who helps us out, Lindsay Orkowski from Brown. And they've both said, hey, look, this isn't just a kids thing. The lessons that you're talking about with this youth audience can be transferred to early adulthood as well.
So it sounds like almost that there was a market pull around the youth, right? Because you're looking, and me and you were talking before we went live about, you're very thankful to be able to raise this capital. And where people are struggling actually raising capital. But what I tell you, I was like, man, you can look around and see mental health is a real issue. It's coming up over and over again. Like I said, I'm here, I'm in Jamaica. I'm looking at certain things taking place on the mental health side, but just trends that I'm seeing in the community that make my mind start spinning around business ideas. And so you have the trend of lack of people joining the military. You've got the mental health, and you've positioned, your company to address this problem. And I think for a lot of you that are tuning in right now, identifying those market pulls is really important, because I don't care how amazing of an entrepreneur you are. If there's no market demand for what you're offering, right, you ain't going to be successful as an entrepreneur. A lot of times we try to force stuff on the market, but at the same time, you've got to also be able to read the market as well. We got a LinkedIn user that has a question. He goes, reading more about your work with Chimney Trail, what is a success story that you've seen as a result of these lessons and products?
Yeah, so this is like from the Department of Defense perspective, literally the $1 million question. Measure this, right? Because it's great to like have a subscription box of things that teach you resilience, but like, how do you actually measure it? And so Dr. Lindsay Orkowski from Brown, we're bringing her on the team to help us do just that. But what we sell is cognitive behavioral therapy, and maybe folks don't know what and it's essentially an ability to differentiate between a feeling that you're having and the thought that creates that feeling. There's a lot of in fact, this is like one of the most well-researched areas of psychiatric medicine, but it's essentially differentiating, hey, just because I'm having that feeling doesn't mean that the thought that created it is particularly logical. And there's 10 distortions that you have to overcome to make sure that you're thinking clearly in a way that's not going to result in pathological anxiety and depression. And so for us, what success looks, family gets the box. Their kid might not be on a path towards some sort of pathological, mental illness, but what we're doing is introducing them to the idea of overcoming these cognitive distortions. So when they see them in the future, they just won't be susceptible to them. They'll be able to overcome them outright. So we see back from, grandparents that are doing activities with their grandkids and outside, and they're excited about like being able to pass on these lessons because at some level know it intuitively, but nobody's ever put a name to it. We also see kids that have felt lonely and mom or dad is doing this activity with them, and then we get feedback saying, hey, look, they're active again. They've like broken out of this weird funk and are now actually doing something, because the activity itself is pretty low barrier to entry. It's just like get you outside doing these activities. So right now, most of our feedback is anecdotal. It's just happy customers. But as we start contracts with the Marine Corps and OSD Suicide Prevention Office, Air Force, and so on, Dr. Rakowski from Brown is going to be doing checkpoint and longitudinal studies to measure the success of the program.
So is the Department of Defense plan on using this with new recruits, like as they go out to actively seek recruiting people, to prepare them and qualify them for the military? I mean, how have you positioned that?
So there's a couple of ways that we're talking through it right now. It's sort of it's not fully formed, but yes, that we are going to provide an active duty solution. So if there are service members that need it, and whether or not they have a family, they could be young and just not have a family yet, whatever the case might be, we're going to make sure we have a solution for them. But right now, the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, is very committed to sort of the wellness of the force, because he's super familiar with the fact that you can't maintain an all-volunteer force with any sort of proficiency without a supportive family unit, whatever like your definition of family happens to be. So we're making it available to the troops, check, but we're also making sure that we address this like among the youth population that is like sort of the military lifestyle has been by virtue of their parents or caregivers' decisions. So the idea for us is that, we partner with the Marine Corps. They say able to, 18,000 Marine Corps families, and we say, got it. And then winter, spring, summer, and fall, there's a new box on their doorstep, whether housing or out in the economy. We're going to make sure that they get a box, so that whether it is the Marine doing the box with their kid, or if the Marine's on the other parent that's behind doing the activity with their kids, their children are being exposed to this.
And so as we wrap up this portion, is there anything we didn't cover that you would like to let our audience know about Chimney Trail?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited, obviously, government space, because we know that there's a real demand signal there. But we're a young company. We're sort of on a really nice trajectory. We're so young, and we're in lesson learned, like we're grabbing them everywhere we can. So if you know somebody that would benefit from a resilience building curriculum, pretty much everybody can. But if you know somebody with kids that you think would benefit from this, and you can go to chimneytrail.com and order a subscription, we'd love to partner with you to learn more about how we can improve the offering and make it more accessible, so that we can really solve this problem. And it feels like, why isn't this the only thing that we're talking about? If 1 in 10 kids in the United States is going to make an attempt on their own life by the time they graduate high school, like, we can't solve any other real problems until we crack the code on this. So any feedback would be super welcome, so that we can improve it and just straight up solve this.
Now we're transitioning to one of my favorite parts of office hours, book recommendations. And as you were talking about measurement, I was thinking about one of your book recommendations, which is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And how she talked about going about measuring it. So talk to us about Grit and why you recommend that book.
Grit is just, it's so awesome, because Dr. Duckworth is brilliant, but the way that she's written Grit is in the most accessible form imaginable. She basically she's just telling a story. And what she's trying to communicate, which is so powerful, is this idea that it's not your IQ. It's not like your raw IQ. It's not your athleticism. It's not even like your raw emotional quotient. None of those things are going to determine you or your child's success in life more than the ability to stick to something for which you're passionate and see it through to completion. The ability to endure through hardship and setback. And I mean, all the stuff that you get coached in the entrepreneurial space that you need to be able to deal with. Grit talks about the science behind why that is so important, and how that it's not this like elusive thing that the only a few people have access to if they're like, a Da Vinci level genius. This is something that we can cultivate in ourselves through resilience building and repetition and all these sorts of things. So she just makes this idea of grit accessible to all of us, which I love.
Great book. I think I read Grit like 2 years ago. So definitely check that out. My book recommendation for today is an oldie but goodie. It's called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind by Al Ries and Jack Trout. Read this book. Like I'm telling, like it needs to be mandatory reading for all entrepreneurs, because one thing I've noticed about our community, Matthew, is a lack of understanding around positioning our products or services in a market with strong demand. Now, on my other podcast, I talk a lot about category design. I have an episode coming up of the transition where I go over category design. But essentially, we have this process where we come with this great idea, right? And then we try to find product market fit for the idea to drive revenue, instead of reversing the process and saying, hey, I need to create a market first, then position a product that works in this market. So again, I gave an example about me being out here in Jamaica. You have a lot of fresh fruit, right? Organic, coconuts, all this other stuff, right? And so I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what are some potential CPG brands, right, that you could build through some of these products, these natural products out here in Jamaica? Because I'm looking around, organic is a new thing, right? People are looking for more healthy alternatives. They're looking for coconut water. So an example would be like Jamaican coconut water, so that's a market. So that's the positioning. Then you position the product. You don't necessarily name it the category. You just call it something else, like, I don't know. You give it a name and then subtitle Jamaican coconut water. See what I mean? So that's how you start thinking about positioning, and it works across the board for a lot of us. And they do some great jobs in that. They do a great job in that book of also telling you some of the traps that come with positioning, such as line extensions. So you'll have a great product and then you have a great brand like Chimney Trail. And so we start off in these subscription boxes, and then we're like, oh, this is a great idea. We should make apparel. So then we start making apparel, and we start doing all this other stuff. And then what ends up happening? You dilute your brand, as opposed to being like a Procter and Gamble, where it's like, oh, you need detergent, Tide. You need dishwashing soap, you need Cascade. So each brand, each category has its own brand synonymous with it. So it breaks it down, story driven. It's not textbook, but it's a really, really good read. And as I was going through it myself, I study branding. I'm a category guy, branding guy. But I was like, man, have I fallen in some of these traps with my own venture? So that's why I encourage reading, because it's a great way to just learn. And, for those of us that are entrepreneurs, that are hustling, figuring it out, right? One of the best things we can do is invest in our own education. And books are like $10 on Amazon now. So I really want to encourage you all to, engage in some kind of reading practice, even if it's not a lot. But and ask us for recommendations through the bunker. Guys like Matt. Matt's in the VIR, as an alumni, hooking and jabbing. You just raised some capital, right? That didn't just magically happen. And so people are going to be coming to you, asking you for advice, and you can't always make time for everyone. So what can you do? Hey, check this book out. And I know that the Penn Fed programs, they have a huge reading list too, that they hook you guys up with books and stuff.
Dude, I mean, it's great. I'm out position. So thanks for the recommendation, Mike. Appreciate it.
So as we close out here, final remarks, word of encouragement you would like to leave our viewers with today, Matt? As they continue on their own journey?
No, yeah. We're in the holiday season. Mental health is a huge thing. folks are, some people are really excited about kicking off 2023. Others they might be harboring some regret or feelings of anxiety and depression. And I just want to let everybody know that you don't need to stay there. You might be feeling it now, but you don't need to stay. And there are ways to come out of it. I know if having feelings is hard to reach out, maybe you don't want to reach out to them because you feel comfortable talking. Log into Chimney Trail and sure that
Seems like we're losing Matt here. His sound's breaking up, but make sure you all check out Chimney Trails. It's been a pleasure having you on. For everyone else, also check out the Transition podcast. We celebrated 100 episodes just before the new year. It's been a blessing to be able to produce that show for you all. And this is something that you can listen to on the go. Make sure y'all check it out. We got a lot of exciting episodes coming to you in the new year. If there's topics you want me to cover on the show or in the newsletter, shoot me an email at mike.steadman@bunkerlabs.org or just message me directly. I'm on LinkedIn. I like to acknowledge our sponsors for the Transition Podcast, the MetLife Foundation, for making that platform possible. So I wish you all a happy new year. We're excited to be here to support you in 2023. Until next time, everyone, peace, love, and have a great rest of your week.